This is Mark C. Danielewski, and you're listening to Booked Podcast.
Welcome to Booked, where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livius Nedden. You may have come to this episode expecting that this would be a review for Grady Hendrix's new book, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire Slaying. But it's not. We had something else kind of pop up on our radar that we wanted to do, so we'll consider this a little bonus episode. Both Rob and I were trying to get around to reading Carpenter's Farm, which is the new project that Josh Malerman is working on, where he's posting chapters online 3 times a week. So we thought, hey, let's check this out, and then let's see if Josh wants to talk about it. And he was nice enough to do so.
Yeah, it's interesting timing with that because of all of the kind of changes that people are experiencing in their lives. And I'm not sure if this is a product of that or just something that he'd been working on anyway. But yeah, we did some reading. We read up on it, and we're going to talk to Josh about that and probably a ton of other stuff as well.
I do want to say, and I'm saying this without knowing what the result is going to be, if it feels a little choppy in parts, there were some things that we talked about prior to actually officially starting the interview that I know are getting cut back in. So our apologies if something feels really short or weird. But there was great stuff for the, from the half hour we talked before we actually started recording. So that may be cut in a little bit. But hey, Josh, thanks for joining us for what really was kind of like almost an impromptu episode of Booked. We're thrilled to have you on again.
Yeah, me too, man. And impromptu is sort of like the word of the day right now. It's kind of like we're all floating in the Black Ocean or something, like in John Langan's Black Ocean from The Fisherman. No, it's not quite that bad, but we're not. Yeah,
let's not make terrible predictions. Yeah, but I could see where yeah.
I read that book recently, actually, and freaking. We can talk about that later.
Oh yeah, that was a good book.
But it seems the perfect time for an impromptu sudden podcast. Hello.
Yeah, we're going to be doing something with Max Booth for his next book here shortly.
Have you read it? Touch the Night?
No,
not yet.
Guys.
Copies have not landed yet, but we had Chismar on in December. Really? Yeah, so we had him on for Gwendy's
Feather.
box.
Yeah. Max's new book is top shelf shit, guys. Like Sadie, Mother Horror reviewed it, said this could be novel of the year. I mean, there's it's really good, and it's also it's not only really well written and emotional, which it is, but it's also he's like legitimately funny. And that's not an easy thing. I remember one time hearing, I think it was Elvis Costello saying that it's actually harder to write like a great rock song than it is a ballad. And I totally know what he means. And I think it's almost, you wouldn't think of it this way, but I think it's harder to pull off legitimately funny on paper than it is scary. Mm-hmm. And Max does it. Like he's just, every page, like you guys will see what I'm talking about right away. And it's a great one.
Well, that's when we interviewed Chismar, we asked him who is he excited about that's stuff that's coming up, and he talked a lot about Max Booth to the point where he put him on a level he actually equivalated him at one point to Richard Lehman. So he was speaking very highly of Max when we were talking.
And Max is young too, which is which is an interesting thing. Matt, I think he's like 26 or something, and I didn't even finish my first full novel till I was 29. I think most of us are more along those lines, and maybe don't really hit a stride even until 5-6 years after that. And so Max is like, he's already writing great shit. And when you read Touch the Night, I'm going to listen to that episode for sure. I just, whatever, write me on Facebook or something and just be like, because I know you're going to write me and be like, dude, you were fucking right. Something,
I hate to say it, but I'm just excited. We're trying to set a world record for the number of Maxes that we can interview in 1 year. So we just did Max Berry. We're going to have Max Booth, I'm assuming. And then we're doing Max Brooks for his new book as well. So
I also read his.
Yeah.
Devolution?
Yes, I did. And I'm glad that you said the title because the whole time I was like, is it devolution or devolution? Is it devolution or is devolution?
I'm sure it's either. I don't know. That's
you're right. I'm sure you're right. It was bothering me. That one's fucking great too. And I was supposed to meet him in Seattle at this Emerald City Comic Con, but then the coronavirus happened. So we were supposed to meet March 15th, we were both supposed to go to Seattle, and we were on like panels together, and we both are through Del Rey. And I was like, first of all, I didn't know when I was reading his book, I didn't know that he was Mel Brooks' son. I didn't know that Max Brooks, the World War Z, was Mel Brooks' son. I just didn't know. And so I'm reading his book to blurb it, and then I Googled him because I was like, oh, this is fucking great. I'm going to look this guy up, you know? And then I was like, wait, what? I didn't know he was like about my age, Mel Brooks' son. I just didn't know any of I didn't know any of that stuff. Yeah.
That's the funny thing about that is he had that video that he put out recently with his dad where they did talking about social distancing and stuff. And so there was a wave of people being like, I can't believe that that's his dad, which triggered in me the response of, I can't believe nobody knew that that was his dad.
I know. No, that's interesting, right? But I think for some reason, maybe it was Game of Thrones was big at the time. For some reason, I always just unnaturally assumed that World War Z was written by like this older bearded glasses guy. I just always, every time I saw World War Z, I imagined like a 70-year-old, like I kind of imagined like George R.R. Martin. Like I just pictured him like wrote World War Z, and then it finally when I looked up Max Brooks, I was like, wait a minute, why did I always just assume this was some other guy? I don't know. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I now that you guys say that, I feel really dumb because I saw that video. And God damn it, I didn't even think about that being Max Brooks. Yeah. like, so he's on my radar. It's funny because Rob said to me he was Mel Brooks' son a few months ago. And I was like, oh, all I knew him from, like, that I knew because I loved World War Z. I was like, well, I know he used to write for SNL. Like, that's, like, I thought it was, like, his kind of claim to fame before, before World War Z. So, anyway.
I didn't know, right? See, I read his thing, but I didn't, and then there's something else too that he's like doing for like coronavirus. He was just like on like MSNBC or something crazy. I can't even remember what it was, but yeah, that dude's and also that book is freaking phenomenal. So both those books. Have you read Devolution? Have you read Devolution yet?
Yeah, we try to so even when we have them in our possession, like we try to keep the reviews really fresh. So like we've been sitting on this Grady Hendrix book for like 2 months, and we're reading it now because we're going to review it tomorrow. So I still have like
that's smart, right?
So it sucks though, because like when we got Inspection, I had it for months, and I was like, God, I really want to read this, but I'm like, well, look, I'm not going to have time to read it twice, so I have to just sit and stare at it on a shelf until like the week before. So getting the advanced copies is awesome. But it's also frustrating because then I have to sit and look at the book for however long before I actually sit down to read it.
So much smarter to do it that way. I totally understand because there's so many little things that sort of like vanish, little details that you would forget. Obviously, you could keep notes, blah, blah, blah. But to have read it the day before and then speak to the author, that's smart. I would do that too. And no, I probably wouldn't have done that. Then I would have heard that that's what you do, and then I would have started doing that.
Dude, and like right now it's just a torture because like I'm looking on my shelf. We have Wonderland by Zoya Stage. We've got 2 Stephen Graham Jones books. We've got Mallory, obviously. There's just a pile of all this stuff that I know.
So I read Wonderland. That's also great. Did you read The Only Good Indians?
No, I started it on accident because I was looking at the ARC has the original release date of April. So I'm like 25% into it, and I had to stop because it got kicked back. The release date's not till July, so I picked up the Grady Hendrix book instead. But like that first 25% is, man, it's classic Jones. It's so good.
Yep, it is. But both of those, Wonderland's also great.
I know you've been busy with a lot of. I mean, hell, you did the Creep Show, and then obviously the Bird Box movie that I know that you had some involvement in. Like, how have you been, man? Like outside of your work stuff.
I mean, it feels like in a sense that it's been all of this, but then somehow, Allison and I I bought the first house I ever bought in my life. Mm-hmm. That was a huge, amazing endeavor, as you can imagine. First time I've ever owned a home. And so there was moving into there, but what I've always looked at places I live in and cities I even live in where if I'm writing there, if I'm writing books or songs there, then I say to myself, okay, this is a good place, or you're in the right place. So when we moved here, when we bought the place, like I immediately set out to write a book. It was almost like in the same way that some people immediately like sage the house, I was like, okay, I have to do this right away. because I don't want like months to pass and then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not writing here. Is this place wrong? You know, something crazy, right? So I immediately wrote a novel when we moved in, and I freaking love that book. And then shortly after that, thinking that I was, I don't know, like I had written a version of Mallory that I thought it was it. We were on the 4th rewrite. I had even received the liner notes, like the red line notes. Like we were at that stage, you know? We weren't just at macro, what do you think about this or that? We were at the like deep, the fine comb fucking stage. And I was looking through it, and I wrote my editor, Trisha at Del Rey, and I was like, Trisha, listen, I think I have a better idea for Mallory. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah. And then she's like, yeah, go for it. And so I scrapped that entire novel and wrote a whole new one from scratch. Ooh. And that is the Mallory that is out, and it's 100 times better than the one that I don't know what I was. I think I was maybe not nervous with the other one, but holding back a little bit, if that makes sense. And I think I was being like too gentlemanly or something with the last one. I don't even know how to explain. Like, you know, sometimes like around certain people you're funnier because they think you're funny, or you're more of a gentleman because they think you, or whatever. Like you almost bounce. That happens sometimes with books too, where for some reason that first draft of Mallory was like I wasn't myself around her, but then the second draft I was like entirely myself. So anyway, that was the second book I wrote in this house. So all of a sudden that was in the first few months of living here, and then now, as you know, I am writing a third one live. And posting it online as I write it. So the house turns out that it's a good place to be.
All right, you mentioned that you're now basically live posting chapters of a book, and that's obviously Carpenter's Farm. So how did that come about? Or is that something you just came up with on the moment, or what was kind of the evolution of that?
All right, so this is a really exciting moment for me, and it's also a little nerve-wracking, but it's exciting because I've had the idea for Carpenter's Farm for years. I've had it for so long, and without knowing how to write it, that when Bird Box came out in 2014, and I was approached by Doug Morano, and D. Alexander Ward to publish a short story in their collection Shadows Over Main Street, right? They asked if I had a short story, and I had never published a short story before. I didn't even have any on me to be published at the time. And I was like, hey, this is an opportunity to, what's the right word? To write maybe an overture or an introduction to Carpenter's Farm, right? Because I've been wanting to write this book forever, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't have it yet, so I was like, but I could write a 2,300 word version or something, right? So I did. I wrote a short story called A Fiddlehead Party on Carpenter's Farm, and I gave it to Doug Morano and D. Alexander Ward, and they published it. It's my first published short story. This is 6 years ago. A few years ago, I tried my hand at the novel. I think I got it. I made it 40,000 words deep and just stopped. I was like, that's it? This isn't it, man. Shit. You know, I'm like, I still don't have it, you know, that kind of thing. And I kept seeing it from this, what do you call it? I don't want to say like needful things, but like the whole town is affected by this farm or something, right? Mm-hmm. I kept seeing it as like the farm becomes like the hub of this town and what Oliver Carpenter is growing out there, or what he discovers to be growing out there, that kind of thing. So I made it 40,000. I'm like, yeah, whatever this isn't you. Just stop. And that book has haunted me. The unfinished one has haunted me for a few years now. It's the only one that I haven't finished of mine. Okay, so that's whatever. It bothers me. So recently I had, I don't know why, but I had a new angle on the idea. The core idea is the same, but how we get to it all changed. And I was like, oh, instead of the whole freaking town, what if 7, a group of friends, thespians, actors, or one of them had to move to Michigan. He inherits the farm. He's there. He inherits the farm from that short story. The guy owned it in that short story. Oliver inherits it. He needs to get the hell out of New York. He goes. His 7 friends are worried about him, not because he sounds like he's doing bad, but he sounds like he's doing maybe too good. And this becomes its own sort of, what does that even mean amongst friends, right? Mm-hmm. What do you mean he's doing too good? You're worried about that, right? But yes, I am worried about that. What does this mean? And that was like, oh, this is it. This is the angle. I got it now. Okay, I can write this book in 3 weeks or however many days I have open. This strikes me right before the virus comes and what has changed everything for a while. And when the virus comes, I'm all prepared to write Carpenter's Farm at home because this was the plan. And my webmaster, Todd Jackson, wrote me saying, hey, do you have a new free short story to replace the one that's been on your website for like 3 years? And I was like, oh, great idea, Todd. Let me check what I have. And I was like, no, I don't really have anything. And then I was like, well, I can just write you a new, I'll just write one to put on there. And then I was like, I don't want to write a short story. I want to write Carpenter's Farm right now. And then I was like, well, no, nah, yeah. And then this goes on for like, a couple of days of what? No, yes. And I write Todd, I'm like, hey, what if we just serialize this novel for free on the site? Can we do that? And he's like, yeah, we can do that. So I had to get Del Rey's permission to make sure, because Mallory, as you know, is coming out in July, and I didn't want any sort of novel release to take any attention away or anything like that. I would only want it to like add to it. I talked to my manager, my agent, Allison. Does everyone think this is a good idea? Is this insane? Does it matter either way? Am I overthinking this? Should we just do this? I finally am going to write this book that's haunted me for freaking years, And every single person across the board is like, yeah, do it. What the hell are you talking about? I'm like, all right. So set it up with Todd, and then here I am. So here are the quote unquote rules. The book is not done, not even close. And the idea is I'm writing it live, quote unquote live, which means I write a chapter, I give it a once over, and then Todd posts it. So I'm a couple chapters ahead, not by much, but a couple chapters ahead, and I try to remain a couple chapters ahead. But there is the high wire danger act of writing myself into a corner or writing a whole 10,000 words where you're like, shit, I got a better idea now. I mean, all those things could happen. And I suppose I could just go and erase what's there and let everyone know that, and start back there. But I think the name of the game here is I'm strapped in, it's begun, and I have to, like, we're at 30,000 feet, and eventually I'll have to land this plane. I think that's the game. It's almost like I've found out a way to force myself to write the book, the one that was unfinished and haunting me for a long time now.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to commend you. So I realize that the plan was to write this book, but at this time we're seeing a lot of people do a lot of free and extra content. And I mean, there are view-alongs for all of your favorite TV shows, and everybody's participating. And then some feel very genuine. And that's what I like about yours. It feels, some I've seen and I thought, all right, this is somebody looking for attention. Yours feels very genuine. And I really like that. So I want to commend you on that. And I don't want to stop talking about Carpenter's Farm. But in this last couple of things that you said, it occurred to me that you scrapped a full first Mallory. Mm-hmm. And then you scrapped 40,000 words on, we'll call the original Carpenter's Farm book at some point. What is that like? Because I imagine this may have happened to you with music as well. It's your baby. Like, you created it. What is like the grief process for scrapping a full book or a good half?
So it's okay. It kind of comes down to like, it is like music, because it's like, did you get the spirit on the take or not? Like, did you get and sometimes with songs, they can one can kind of sneak by you because maybe you felt different that day, or you're like, oh, it's fine, the drums are on beat, who cares, that kind of thing, and then it gets by you. But with a book, you're like, is the spirit in this thing or not? And if it's not, and you realize that later, well, shit, right? Then you have a choice. Do we want to do we want to artificially inseminate this book with spirit, or do we want to just start over? And so. Because if you ask me, I think it's harder to like work in excitement, to thread in a thrill, rather than it's naturally coming from an unsettling platform to begin with. And so for me, it's less daunting to say, scrap it, let's start it again. I'll do 3,000 words a day. I'll have a more spirited draft in 3 weeks, whatever. Rather than sitting here and tediously trying to force it upon this sort of corpse of a draft, right? So, and the first book I ever did that with was Bird Box. After HarperCollins had bought Bird Box, they gave me enough notes. Essentially what it was the rough draft was there were 14 housemates, and they convinced me that the story would be better if there was only around 7 or so. And so then I was like, okay, so I could either go into this chapter, and change the names and just get rid of, double up on the names and get rid of like Alan and whoever else was there, right? Or I should rewrite this scene from, Tom and Felix's point of view. And then I was like, shoot, well, I should probably do that, because I want to stay in step with their character, right? So with Bird Box was already picked up all these notes, and then I rewrote that book chapter by chapter from scratch, all except for the birth scene. So I had done it there, and it was the first time I ever did it, and I saw it worked, and the second round was so much better than the first. They were right. Less housemates made for more of a spotlight on each, all that stuff. So I saw it work there. And so weirdly enough, years later, the next time I do that was with Mallory, which there was no intended uniformity, obviously. What kind of lunatic would be like, I'm going to scrap this one too. Yes. Like I imagine a guy in Shine, like shooting his book, but it did happen with Mallory. So those two gave me some more confidence with Carpenter's Farm, because it's like, okay, you got to 40 and you kind of fantasizing about, you always fantasize about going back and finishing it. Why don't you start this one over, man? And that's what led to, and why don't you tell it from this angle? And that's where we are now.
Makes sense. When you explain it, it makes sense. It does, like Livius was saying, though, it sound like it would be a painful process.
Well, okay, before doing all this, I had heard that like years ago when I was like 22 or something, I had heard that Ken Kesey wrote Cuckoo's Nest and then realized this would be a better story told from the chief's perspective or whatever, right? And then wrote it all over it, the whole thing, started from scratch. And I remember reading that bit of information when I was early 20s, and just thinking, what? This guy wrote a book twice? I couldn't, and back then it was like the idea of writing one book. It honestly sounded like climbing a mountain or something, and like, this guy, no way. But now I totally get it. I just totally get it, because that first go round can become like the world's greatest outline, or like what you guys were just saying, how you want to read the book just prior to the podcast, so it's all so fresh with you. Now imagine, well, it's kind of weird to imagine this, but now imagine that you read Devolution, and then instead of doing the podcast, you start writing it that day. That's kind of what it's like. And you have everything, the mood, the scenes, the characters, who they are, everything's super fresh in your head, but now you're going to write the story. And so if you kind of look at it like that was all training for this writing of this book, that first go round, and then it's sort of like a positive like switch on that.
It's a great perspective, and obviously it works. Now, all right. So the other thing about Carpenter's Farm, so Livius will back me up on this. I'm the type of person that when I'm creating something, I have a very strong idea of what I want that to be, and so I shy away from other voices a little bit. And so the unique thing I think that's going on with Carpenter's Farm, aside from the fact that it's being serially released for free on your website, is the fact that you're encouraging people to collaborate and kind of add to the, I don't know what you want to say, universe of Carpenter's Farm. And so there's all of these people online supporting you with other types of stuff like music, short stories, poetry, art, and stuff like that. So what was your thought on doing that?
Man, so okay, so the real Shane Douglas Keene is the one who opened that door, because he wrote me on Twitter that he had heard what I was about to do, or I had tweeted about it, and he asked if he could write a poem along with each chapter, and I was like, whoa, that sounds fucking great. Where's this idea coming from, right? But then it kind of struck me also like the idea for releasing a serialized novel on a website, writing it quote unquote live, is odd in and of itself. And so Shane's suggestion totally kind of made sense, right? So I was like, yeah, of course, let's do this. Well, then that opened the doors. And I was like, well, okay, wait, who else can, like, maybe I can get someone to work with like music here and that kind of thing. And then all I did was post something like, hey, anybody play along, really? And then I got a message from a fella in Atlanta named Chris Campbell that was like, hey, I read the first few chapters and I came up with this. And he sent me this thing. And, honest to God, guys, I had no idea what to expect. And you know where the story's going, that I loved it. But I had no idea what to expect. I was like, just, this could be it could be this guy banging on a lead pipe, crying. Who knows, right? Which that'd be kind of awesome, actually. But it's just like so good. It's this like epic, like ominous thing with these. So you got the ominous like tones of a horror story building, but then it has the earthy farm acoustic guitar also, and there's almost like just a freaking dollop of like a Western to it. And the whole thing about it, I was like, oh my God, this is freaking perfect. And I wrote the guy and went crazy, as you can imagine. And we ended up having a Skype session, and now he is up to 28 minutes, I think. And it's all in a playlist. Like, it's all linked on the website, right at the Carpenter's Farm page. I think he's at like 28 minutes, and we are 100% now, him and I, looking at this like he's doing like a soundtrack for the book. And Jim Byrne wrote a song that we are going to put on the soundtrack. So, and I'm definitely absolutely going to run vinyl of this when this is done. Whether that's I find a label to do it, which that might be a crazy thing to convince someone of. Will you print the soundtrack for this serialized free novel with the right? Or I'm just going to run it myself. But just to think, Shane writes me, can I add poems? Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And then because of Shane, I write, hey, anyone play along? And this guy sends me holy shit stuff. Have you heard what he's done yet?
So I was telling Rob right before we got on with you that I listened to some of it today, and the quality was so good that I actually said to Rob that this is probably going into my my background music reading stuff. Like, when I read, a lot of times I'll put on just instrument. I can't listen to music that's got like vocals in it when I'm reading, so I'm listening to whatever chill house music and classical and stuff depending on my mood. But I was probably about 4 minutes in listening when I was like, oh, this is going into the rotation for sure.
Yep. And then on Skype, I showed him my horror soundtrack collection. I was like, dude, I really want you to understand how much I love this shit. And what he's doing is like, it's as good as anything that I've got here. And it totally came. So then the writer Ted Grau.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I didn't know this, but at some point, Chris said to me, so Ted wrote me that Ted had seen that post and wrote Chris saying, hey, you might want to look into this. You do soundtracky stuff. This guy is saying he's writing a book, and if you want to add music. So Ted actually linked the two of us up.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome.
I know. And then Michael Bailey wrote a short story for it, and he's working on another one now. Jimmy Doom, who is an amazing Detroit musician, personality, and an actor, by the way. I think that might be partially why he's drawn to this. He's an actor. Jimmy Doom is writing a short story for it. There's been artwork. Yeah, it's. I hope that Steve Green wrote a song. I hope that it's what's it called? I hope that this is just the beginning of that. I would love if there was just a freaking flood of drawings and songs and everything. And then who knows? Maybe there could be some sort of volume down the road of Carpenter's Farm, all of Shane's poems, the short stories that were inspired. Who knows? Why not have like some, 400-page, 500-page thing with all the drawings and everything together?
So that answers one of my questions, which I was going to wait until kind of towards the end to ask about collecting all this stuff together. That's kind of what I meant about it. It feels genuine. So without anybody misinterpreting what I'm saying, your timing on this couldn't have been better, right? You've got a lot of people that are sitting at home, not a lot to do. And I think that something like this could put someone on the path to creating something directional, right? So they see your posts and they go, hey, I've got a lot of time on my hands because I can't go anywhere. So maybe I'll see if I can contribute a poem or a song or whatever. And hopefully that genuine feeling comes from the fact that something good could come out of all of this, and not necessarily just this, but the ability that people have to connect and create together may have increased significantly. How likely were these people to do this when they were working 55 hours a week, just trying to squeeze in their own work, versus now having this extra time and being able to collaborate and create something that so far, from what I've seen, is wonderful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I when I was talking to the webmaster at first about let's do it for free, it obviously struck me that everyone's at home and everyone's locked down and I'm locked down. And then I've seen a few people post things like, hey, it's okay to do nothing with this. You don't have to write, King Lear like Shakespeare did or whatever. You can do nothing. And then I also see people writing it's okay to be freaked out. You don't have to be positive. And I agree, of course, with all that stuff. But I also say it's okay to be completely freaked out and try to write King Lear. I think that it's possible to do both. I think it's okay to let this fucking super weird time, to feel it, to feel weird, to be confused and moody and totally anxious and unsettled. And also, try to do something within that realm. As you said, we're all in the same boat. So in that boat, why not? And here we go. And then, like you said, I don't know Chris well enough to know what he normally does. But I can safely say that him and I would not be working on the book and music without this moment in time. So that is a small positive in a very strange era.
Well, I think one thing that you may have unintentionally done with this project is, as you guys were talking, I was thinking to myself, man, there's probably people out there who, with the time that they have, maybe they don't know how to start their own project or do a full project, but collaborating on a project is the perfect way to get them the juices flowing and get them going. And so you kind of gave people an opportunity who aren't ready to go right to King Lear to contribute to it. And I think that's probably pretty amazing.
Yeah. And then, I can say this kind of thing, and this is going to sound like you're running for office, but honest to God, if I was going to write the book either way, right? And then doing it this way, I don't know. Oh, this is another thing to throw in, is I love that there's no, on the site, there's no likes, views, comments, reviews. It's just not a very, unless you're reading, I guess, an advanced reader's copy or something, it's just not very common in this era to experience a work of art without any of that sort of aggregate opinion thing going on. And which I'm fine with all that, but it's a different experience. I literally don't when you look at Carpenter's Farm, you have no idea how many people read it. It could be 40,000. It could be 4. I don't know how many have read it. And I've asked Todd, the webmaster, not to tell me. I don't even want to,
I want to give Todd some props, because I thought, I'm going to have to read this on a web page. So, I pulled out the iPad, right? And I was like, this is super clean. There's a next chapter button at the bottom, and something super subtle that I really liked. The background color changes by chapter.
I like that too.
Yep.
Yeah. So I just want to say, we're talking about all this great collaboration stuff, and I know you've mentioned Todd a couple of times, but let's take a moment and give Todd some props for putting something together that's really crisp, clean, and pretty.
Yeah, the typography is great. It's very well presented.
Yeah, I almost can't imagine the book without the different color backgrounds now. I wonder if it's ever printed, if it's possible to have to retain those or in some weird way or something. But yeah, that's all him. Of course, I was like, can we put this on the site? And he was like, yeah, what do you think about this with the backgrounds? And he, and even how chapters 1 and 2 are extremely short, and he figured out a way to present them as if they were their own little entities. And I was like, oh yeah, this is good. Right. Okay. I get it. I get what you're doing. And as you said, the next page is a chapter. I would never have thought of that in a million years. All that stuff. Yeah. He's great, man.
I have a structural question about the story, and I don't want you to spoil anything if you have plans, but I found it interesting that our narrator is an omniscient narrator that's not part of the story. So to set it up, it's being told to us by an 8th friend, right, who is not at the farm. So again, I don't want you to reveal anything that comes up in the book, but that was an interesting decision, I thought. So I don't know how much you can talk about that without giving anything away.
I can't. No.
Perfect. No, that's totally cool. I thought this is kind of a weird setup. So I'm hoping it goes somewhere, but
yeah. I just I don't think I am going to say much about him yet. Actually, I think you gave me an out by saying that I didn't have to, and now I'm going to actually take it, because for me it was like I knew I definitely did not want to have a whole book written in present tense, like let's say Tracy is experiencing it or something. That would have been too cheesy. Oliver is looking at me, I'm looking at him, it would have felt too strange or something. But then I also didn't want someone fully removed from it. I needed someone that knew them really well. But that's all I'll say about it right now, is I definitely needed someone that knows them really well to tell this story.
All right, so I know it's not complete, but do you have how do I say this? Do you have like roughly a chapter count? So we're currently on chapter 9. Do you know if it's going to be 35, 40, 50, 200 chapters?
I think it's going to be around 32, 33, right around there. Early 30s, I think so. Because I like so I'm kind of eyeing it with like a few like more, this is an odd thing to say out loud, but with a few more like sort of centerpiece scenes. A dinner scene so far that was posted would be one, and there's two or three other sort of centerpiece scenes that would be I don't even close to like 10,000 words on their own, that kind of thing. But so that I can sort of gauge, okay, you wrote 9, and how deep do you think you are? Well, I think I'm probably about not a third, but we're getting there, like a fourth, something like that. So somewhere between 30 and 40 begins to sound right. It doesn't always stay so uniformly like that, but if you guys know from every book you read, chapters tend to, stay about the same. It's not like all of a sudden there's a 100-page chapter, but that kind of sounds fun right now. But so I'm guessing between 30 and 40, something like that. Yeah. And I do know how it ends. And I do have scenes on the way, a couple like landmark scenes on the way, but not much more than that right now. So there's a bit of a seat of your pants, to say the freaking least. Yeah.
The thing I love about it is like you saying that this whole idea kind of germinated from just the fact that you needed to refresh the website a little bit. So, but it sounds like it's a project that was kind of far beyond what you expected it could be. So I'm happy that it's ending up being such a positive experience for you.
Yeah, well, it is. I'm getting over a ghost of my own by doing it. And then also, and this is what I was going to say before, and I sidetracked myself, and I don't mean to sound like so, whatever, like noble or saying the right thing. But honestly, if one person that is on lockdown gets something out of this book, then, oh my God, holy shit, that's absolutely mind blowing. And maybe that one person is Chris Campbell, who's doing the music, Mm-hmm. And, or maybe it's a reader that, I don't know, just like needing something new and a different way to read, and they're at home and it's different for them and exciting, then, oh my God, success, To me, again, because a few people ask me, like, how could you give a book away for free? But it's like, oh my, I don't know. Mallory's coming out in July. I was going to write this right now anyway. There's people, they're locked down, I'm locked down. Like, this, I guess this is how I connect with people, man. And if I want to, if someone gets something out of it, holy cow, cherry on top.
Look, without blowing smoke up your ass or whatever. So I wanted to watch a YouTube video, and I'm gonna get all of this wrong, but the Internet Archives they changed the way that people could borrow books recently, and there was some outrage by some authors and stuff, and I kind of looked at this and some of the names involved. I'm like, these people are living off royalties of the stuff they've done already, probably for the rest of their lives, and they're mad that during lockdown, more people can borrow their ebook, right? So I kind of set my position there, I guess, unintentionally on how I feel about it. On the flip side, I'm looking at a guy like you and thinking, here's a guy who's writing a book. And he's doing a couple of things. He's making it free. He's giving people something to look forward to 3 days a week. But my other thought was, so I don't write. But I thought, all right, here's a guy, and he's putting out these little chapters 3 times a week. And as I read them, I go, there's not a whole lot. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying this. There's not a whole lot to what he did. I was like, somebody else who maybe has the intention of writing can say, well, if this guy can just write a chapter every 4 or 5 days, even. Like, maybe I could do that. And maybe in 39 weeks, I can have a book. Because you mentioned it earlier when you said someone threw out a book. Like, the thought of writing a book is very, very daunting to somebody who doesn't write. And maybe they have the idea. They have the story in their head. But this could be a path for somebody else. You're saying someone get out of it. I wouldn't be surprised if someone writes their first novel from seeing you do this little bit by little bit over the course of what's going to wind up being 10 or 15 weeks.
Yep. It's exactly what I'm talking about. How do you, because you could say that kind of thing to someone. Well, if you just do a little bit, it adds up, right? But to actually see that, like you say, like if you read just chapter 3 on its own, and you have to wait for chapter 4, right? You read chapter 3 on its own, and you're like, oh, I could write chapter 3. Okay, and then like 2 days later, you read chapter 4. I could do that. You know how they say that everyone that listened to the Velvet Underground when they came out, they went out and started their own band. Like I could do this.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you mean, and it's the kind of thing where I could say that over and over and over again. Believe me, you just do a little bit at a time, and it builds up into a novel. Blah blah blah. And then, but no one ever. I don't know how to get that to settle in or to take root in a stranger's mind other than this. But that's just like a wonderful byproduct. And if that happens, man, and anyone listening is the person that sees that what we're talking about right now and writes their own book, please let me know that you did that, because that would be amazing. I totally agree. That's an exciting way to look at it. It's like, how weird, because it's like doing a book live. You're accidentally or like doing almost like a presentation of process.
Yeah.
Without setting out to do that, you're just setting out to write a book or to entertain people that are locked down or to brighten up someone's day or to get the ghost off your back. The last thing you're thinking of is like, how can I present this process, right? But that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. That's interesting, and I really love that.
I think I'd like to encourage people. The example I can think of is I have a friend who did the last NaNoWriMo, and he was closing in on like the deadline, but also really close to the finish line with writing it. And he was like, I feel like I'm just writing garbage. And so I told him, write the garbage. The goal is to finish the book, not have a manuscript to hand over to a publisher. Like, just keep writing. And so I feel like that's the big part of it, is just like you're doing something to encourage creativity where people might not know they need that push too.
Yeah, I say the same thing to you, and I may actually just use that phrase, write the garbage, because I run into that all the time when I talk to, like, I have friends who have brilliant ideas for books, and they're like, it's not going well or whatever. It's like the first draft's not supposed to go well, man. That's the whole point. The first draft is supposed to, like, you're supposed to think that you're terrible for like at least half of the experience. Be like, I'm so bad, and the other half is supposed to be pretty damn fun. And then the rewrite is a different version of that, where you're like, this is terrible, but I can fix it. And then you watch it slowly get better, and you're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. It really is incredible once you learn that. It's almost becomes sort of like a wizard's secret or something. The secret to writing a novel is to freaking write it. And then without worrying if it's good or bad, and then knowing that you can fix it, build it, dress it up, do whatever the hell you want to it the next go round. And that's once that philosophy completely takes root, then, I mean, you could write anything at any time. Yeah. And I absolutely have that philosophy. And so I think that makes it me a likely candidate to say, okay, then I can write a book live, because I care if it's good or bad, but I sort of implicitly trust that the readers or anyone involved in this trip understands that it's live. So if there's a chapter that comes up that's like a total fucking lemon, I think that, I don't know. I think that people understand that this is happening live.
Yeah, but at least you don't let yourself get stopped by the like self-consciousness of it, because you know better. You've gone through it, and you know that At the end, what it is going to be what it is or whatever.
Right. There's nothing worse than the shame of not writing it. And that's for me at least. And that's exactly what I'm saying about the Ghost of Carpenter's Farm is that it was haunting me for years, where I'm like, why haven't I finished that one? I've written like 13 novels since then. Why haven't I finished that one? And it was like, I would be at a bar or a party and talking about ideas and this and that. And then all of a sudden that one would just like pop in my head and I'm ruin me for a second, It's like, oh, why didn't I do that one?
All right, moving off of Carpenter's Farm a little bit. It's been a while since we've talked, and you have actually moved into screenplays as well. So I know Rob and I both watched The House of the Head on Creep Show, which was excellent, by the way. Tell us a little bit about the difference between like screenplay writing and novel writing, and there has to be. I have to imagine there's some pretty significant differences.
Oh, man. Well, okay. So the Creep Show one was amazing because I worked with Greg Nicotero and I worked with Brian Witten, who's a producer and a producer on something else that I also wrote the screenplay for. I wrote the screenplay for A House at the Bottom of a Lake, and that is with Netflix right now. And we're going through many different things with that right now.
Hold on a second. I'm going to interrupt to give Rob an opportunity to say something on that. Holy shit.
Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so that's all happening, but then I have to tell you, and Ryan, my manager, keeps telling me like, no, dude, you're doing it, like we're doing it. But I'm like, God, I must be doing something okay or similar to write with the screenplays, because they're ending up in places, whatever, but it does not have the same like gunslinger, like let's fucking roll that the novel has. It just doesn't, man. It's got to be 22 pages for the episode, or it has to be between 90 and 120. And you think in terms of arcs and acts, and you think in terms of every word's got, what do you mean every word's got to count? And for me, I love, like, I feel like if I was like in the NFL, I'd be one of those guys that like tries to bomb the ball all the time, just like chuck it. And you can't really do that with a screenplay, but you can with a novel. and so I'm doing it. I'm learning. Creep Show was a little more manageable in that it was shorter. And also Greg Nicotero was awesome to work with. His ideas were awesome. It was just, he's kind of like just what we're doing right now. Just like a guy that's excited about the genre talking, about stuff. And House Bottom Lake was a little bit like, holy shit, this is hard. But I got through it, and now I wrote another one also, called Only Children, but I don't know where that's gonna end up yet. But I just put it this way: I'm loving doing it. I'm doing it. I'm working my ass off on it. There's good things are happening, but the novel is home.
I mean, to be honest, I want you to keep writing novels. I want you to be super successful, and I'm excited about A House at the Bottom of the Lake and stuff. But God damn it, I'd hate to think that you'd ever hang up your long form story writing for television.
Oh man! Oh God!
Yeah, the shudder.
I just imagined myself in like a bar in LA when you just said that, like alone, like maybe even the bartender's not there.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. All right. The elephant in the room. How did Netflix Bird Box kind of change your life?
Oh my God, guys, we were so to say that we were unprepared for Bird Box. I don't even know. I can actually give you an example, but I feel weird doing this. But I'll just do it because why not? I'll just give you numbers, okay? If it sounds weird and greasy to give some numbers, then I don't know, erase this. If it doesn't, then use it. And that line too. But previous to the movie coming out, prior to the movie coming out, Bird Box was selling about like 100 copies a week for like 4 years or something like that, or more than that, 5 years, whatever. But like 100 a week for 5 years. So meaning like the same as when it first came out, to all the way up to like when that movie came out. And it was this odd thing, this sort of like this strange, just steady Eddie book where my agent Kristen would say like, yeah, it's still just we're years now, and it's still right around the same exact. And and I'd be like, oh, it's great, okay, great. So there was something interesting about Bird Boxes in that it was not just like word of mouth or spreading, but just this steady thing for like years. Okay. So when the week that the preview came out for the movie, we sold like 300 copies in 1 week, and we were like, holy fuck. Like, this is like, this is unbelievable, man. We were like kind of all out of our minds, This is like our best week ever in the 6 years now, or 5, whatever. And we had a talk with the publisher and stuff, and they were like, hey, listen, just so you know, this may be as good as it gets. It might. The preview came out this week. Sandra Bullock's in the preview, and who knows? But what an exciting fucking week. Congratulations, And we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. Allison and I hosted a screening of the movie at like what used to be an old Ford showroom around here. Invited like 50 friends. There's this concrete stage with a movie screen, these little like theater seats sort of. Awesome night. Everyone gets wasted. We eat, we see the movie, and we're like, that's it. That's the peak, That's the freaking peak of the experience. In the first week that movie was out, Bird Box the book sold 20,000 copies.
Holy shit.
So to give you a perspective on how unprepared we were like, 300's unfucking believable. And I still feel that. We're still like, that would be unbelievable. But for a moment in time, that idea was just shattered or something. And it was like this whole other reality was like placed upon us or something. And I think we all felt like we were sort of just standing at like the head of a wind tunnel, And then all of a sudden, the memes and these challenges and around town, I went to a Starbucks, and the people that work there, like, you wrote Bird Box, I saw you in the Detroit News, and all of a sudden, I see people with tattoos of Sandra Bullock with blindfold and all these like things, and I'm like, holy shit, Bird Box. But it was so far out from like what I was used to, because remember, I've been with Mallory for a minute now, and it was so far out from what I'm used to experiencing that I almost saw this all as like something incredible that was happening to her and not me. And maybe that's a defense mechanism. Maybe that's so that an identity defense mechanism where I could be like, I'm still me, and this is all happening to you, right? But that's how it felt. It felt like it was like, congratulations, Mallory, your story, you're fucking killing it. I'm gonna go write another book. And so there was definitely like a seismic shift in things. And like even today, I saw a friend sent me a photo of like a famous model that has a tattoo of Sandra Bullock with a blindfold, and the only thing I want to throw in there is like, man, I wish somebody would make a Halloween mask of that, like a rubber mask, Sandra Bullock with the blindfold. Like, come on. That's like every horror author's like dream is to write a book where the main character becomes a Halloween costume,
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before.
That's great.
So again, if that sounded like a little weird to give the numbers, I guess I don't really care, because I don't know, I can't imagine a better or clearer way to express how shocking all that was to all of us.
Well, I want you to know that it had changed my life too, because when people were talking about it at work, I just casually say, my friend wrote that book. So definitely helped me out too.
That's now on Rob's Tinder profile, by the way. So you've changed Rob's life in a very positive manner, I think.
It's really helping out.
I think that's really cool, because what you said about it being Mallory's story always kind of touches to that thing that I think about. And that's why I said, like, it's your baby. You know what I mean? And that just, when we're talking about throwing away a book, like scrapping a book, that kind of plays into that. Like, you have an affection for the people, the characters that you created. So just to hear you say that even in your mind you thought that, I don't maybe it is a defense mechanism, but it kind of solidifies my thought, is that when you've written a great story, that you're attached to those people, that those people become a tangible thing and not just that story you wrote.
Well, her especially. She's long been, from the word go. I wrote the rough draft for Bird Box in 2006. I've told you guys this before. I wrote the rough draft in 2006. I rewrote it in 2010. It was picked up in 2012. The movie rights 2013, and in 2013 is when I scrapped it and essentially rewrote the whole thing from scratch. So at that point, like, what did they actually buy? You know, when a tree falls in the woods, like, what book did they actually buy, right? The one you bought, you scrapped, and then you gave them, they put out this book. Anyway, I've been with her forever, and she's always just been so wonderfully smooth, easy for me to write, and I don't know why. I think that it has to do with, like, that I would act. I almost look at her like she's a not just a sister, but like a twin sister of mine. That, like, if I was in Bird Box, I would react or act the same exact way she did, which is mostly fly on the wall, leaning towards the optimistic people, but, like, still aware that, like, the optimist might be, like, you know, about to do something terribly wrong and dangerous. I think I would live by the blindfold rather than being I'm someone who would probably hide from that experience rather than try to, like, defeat it by invention or even just facing it, you know, insanely. I think that how she acts in that world is exactly how I would act or something. And I think that's why it's easy for me to write her. Maybe, I don't know. But so then I had the rough draft for Bird Box was like twice as long as what came out. And there were other threads in there that I got rid of, blah, blah, blah. So before the movie came out, I would, you know, Kristen, my agent, and other people, would you write a sequel? I'm like, maybe one day I have, like, ideas for it, you know. And then the movie came out, and Alice and I are watching it in the Netflix office. And the screening room was actually called the Upside Down, by the way. And we're watching it in there. And at the end of the movie, I mean, I'm emotional as fuck during this, right? And at the end of the movie, I turn to Alice and I'm like, wait, now what happens to Mallory? And she's like, oh, come on. And I'm like, no. Like, seriously, don't you want to know? You know? And she's like, come on, dude. Well, that's up to you, I guess. I'm like, yeah. All right. And so I talked to Kristen and I talked to Del Rey, and I was like, so I have this thread that I removed from Bird Box that I think could be like a good second one of her story. So the weird thing is that was the first version of Mallory that I again scrapped. So let's officially put that thread to sleep, right? Because now it's been removed twice from the experience. But it was enough for me to say, like, yeah, let's write another one. And with Mallory, the book, I knew right away when I was talking to Kristen and Del Rey, they were like, you know, what would you call it or whatever? I'm like, oh, it's Mallory for sure. Like, this is her story. No matter what else is going on in this world, in this scenario, other characters, this is Mallory's story. Like, and I want that to be, I just want to, like, say that. I want to, like, stamp that this is Mallory's story. The whole thing, not just this newer book. This is all her story. You know, if there was 100 books, this is Mallory's story. And so that, calling it Mallory, leaning on this thread that was around since 2006, the original, the one that I scrapped again. But there was a familiarity to everything. So writing the second, getting into it a second time actually felt like really good. You might imagine that there was some, like, pressure because the movie did really well. Bird Box obviously has done well in, like, the horror world and in the world, and the book means a shit ton to me. But I didn't feel any pressure really, like, at all. I was just like, no, I just like writing Mallory's story. This is fun. I almost feel more pressure working on Carpenter's Farm than I did writing Mallory.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine that with, like, when the success level of something increases, also the expectations of the fans is something that, even whether you let it influence you or not, is something that you're more aware of. So to me, that would be the factor that I would be, if I were in your shoes, worried about, is, like, I don't want to let the story be tainted by what people expect or want to happen, or, you know, that type of thing, and stay true to what the story is. Well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple ways of looking at it, or something. It's like, God, can you even imagine, like, George Martin or, like, Patrick Rothfuss? Like, well, let's say George Martin, like, how insane that, I just can't even freaking imagine sitting down and supposedly he already kind of works slower. Like, I can't even imagine what's going through that guy's mind when he would sit down in the middle of all that, right? Like, But then I got a smaller taste of it with Mallory to Bird Box, and I don't know how to explain it. It's just the sense of like, I don't know. I'm even a fan of spectacular failures. So it's like Ishtar or something. So like if this like, you know, I don't know, there's something cool too if George R. Martin put out a book that was just terrible. Like there's something awesome about that too, right?
I fully agree.
Right. So I think that there's, you know, all those things. That's one of the joys of being a student of the genre is that you're aware of the failures as well. And you kind of almost like those writers better for having them. But Mallory, no, wow, I felt great that whole time, man. Like, I don't know if I would ever write another one. And if you read the book, you'll see whatever, if you think it's ended or not. But I do know that I freaking love hanging out with her, man. I really do. She's just like, it's very like, okay, all right. It's almost like I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing. Yeah, well, tell me, all right. I'm listening to you. You're your mom.
Well, I'm going to be very honest with you. Like, there's something that happens with us in the podcast where when we know we're going to read a book, I don't feel the impulse to like, you know, look ahead to see what it's about. So I know nothing about anything about what the book is. So is there what's the general idea with this one? If you have something that you pitch out there.
I haven't done this much yet. I had one interview about it. I'm going to do it in the vaguest terms possible. It's 12 years after they arrive at that school for the blind. So Tom and Olympia, boy and girl, are now 16. And they're living somewhere, and a census man, which is what an interesting person in that world as census, you know, taker would be, someone going around trying to take stock of where everyone's at, delivers them records, you know, survivors, this kind of thing. And in the papers that he delivers them is information that possibly someone in Mallory's life is actually still alive, and that maybe she has to find out if that's true or not. And that's all I'm going to tell you. And that's a very small piece of that book in a certain way. You'll see what I mean. But that's where it starts, pretty much.
That's awesome.
All right.
I like that. Post-apocalyptic census taker is a really interesting look at things, I guess. Yeah.
It's like, where are we at here? Oh, man, well, you know, there's like an engine that runs over there. There's a car. No, an engine.
So we're aware that, you know, Del Rey purchased a significant portion of your back catalog, and I'm really excited to get to Goblin and on this, the Day of the Pig. Thoughts on the kind of, you know, what I'm imagining is going to be a wider release. I know that both of those were kind of like limited edition.
Yeah.
Thoughts on getting that into fans' hands?
Oh my God, dude, I'm so excited. So they got A House at the Bottom of the Lake, which comes out later this year, in right around Halloween, I think, which awesome. They're going to have to I think they're going to have to fatten it up a little, the font on that one, to make it its own book. But it doesn't have to be quite children's book, but somewhere between here and there. And then Pig and Goblin, I think, are they both next year? I think they may both be next year. And then Spin a Black Yarn, which is a collection of shorter stuff, would be the fourth book that they got in that they picked up in that deal. Dude, I am so excited about that because, okay, how do I explain this? So each one so far, each book has alternated between Big Five and indie, right? Mm-hmm. So there was Bird Box, House of Bottom Lake, Black Mad Wheel, Goblin, Unbury Carol, on this, the Day of the Pig, Inspection, and then, by the way, Mallory was supposed to be the next one, but Carpenter's Farm, which is free on a website, and then Mallory. So the whole way so far has uniformly alternated. So for me, from my angle, that's good enough. I mean, are you kidding me? Right? That's the greatest thing ever, this system or this what's happening. But to hear that those other ones are going to be on the same shelves, you know, Pig, oh God, I love that book. Pig is just like so much fun, and Goblin, there's just so much color. I just feel like it just, sometimes when I read a review of Inspection, let's say, and I can tell that the reader has only read like Inspection and Bird Box or something, And I also sometimes I'm like, oh, I think that they would love Goblin, but there isn't a Goblin for them to be had. Or I think like, oh, I think this person would like House, judged on a review or something, but there isn't one to be had, you know. So for me, this is really exciting as shit. I don't know what they're gonna like exactly look like cover art. I don't know how much they're gonna change, if there's gonna be a uniformity to all this. I don't really know the plan on all that yet. I imagine House of Autumn Lake's got to be coming probably sooner than later, but that's it's exciting as hell, man. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you're talking about like the kind of limited release life that these books originally led versus how they're going to be like a wider release. And one of the things that we try to do on the podcast is focus on books that if we talk about it, people can also have access to it. So
sure.
Books like Goblin, or, you know, other limited release books, like, of course we want to, you know, review it and talk about it. But if people can't get their hands on it, like it makes it difficult to talk about. So that's I don't even know if I have a question there, but it's interesting. Like, I love the idea of a special limited release. Like the Goblin book is gorgeous. Pig is gorgeous. And I'm very proud to have my This Is Horror copy of House of Bottom of the Lake.
Yeah, me too.
But, which by the way, the cover art on all of the three I just mentioned are all amazing. But yeah, like the wide distribution thing is something that will end up being better for like the readers in general.
Yeah, and then, you know, it starts to, I've always felt this way, and I'm sure I've talked to you guys about this before, that one of the excitements about being, one of the advantages or one of the perks of being a prolific is that you kind of remove the spotlight off of a single work of art. The prolific, like I am a prolific, right? The prolific has like a body of work that becomes almost sort of like Stephen King obviously is like this. Hitchcock was like this. Bob Pollard, Guided by Voices, is definitely like this, where it almost starts to be, Joyce Carol Oates is for sure like this. It starts to have like, it becomes more the, how they play off each other versus a single work, right? Whereas like, you know, if you wrote one book in your life and it's awesome, I mean, come on, that's freaking amazing. But as a writer, it removes some of the, I wouldn't say pressure, but some of the spotlight off each one. So to me, to have Goblin, Pig, House of Autumn Lake, and Spin a Black Yarn too, to have that in the fold, in the, even, you know, let's just say even like in the horror scene, right? To have it, those like consciously like a part of the quilt rather than, you know, I feel like without it, I feel like half of this canon is missing right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to talk about myself in such a, oh, my canon, you know, but you understand what I mean. Like, like half of this is like missing. So sometimes you're like, oh God, I wish this fucking guy had Goblin, you know? And so it really does, it helps in more than just like, I think if you read Goblin, it makes Carol better. I think if you read Carol, it makes Pig better. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt that way when I get into like a writer. I typically would read like 8 books by the guy or girl in a row, you know, that kind of thing, and like get to know them, and they each kind of play off each other. And if there's a lemon in there, like we said before, well, that's kind of interesting too. Totally. And so, yeah. Right. And so I think that adding these 4 in just even helps the ones that are already out.
Yeah, let me substantiate what you said there. So prior to doing this podcast, I was like an absolute completionist for favorite authors, and there would be nothing more frustrating than knowing there's something out there that's out of print. I mean, obviously, digital books has changed that somewhat, because, you know, growing up, if something was out of print, if your library didn't have, if your local bookstore didn't have it, you're kind of out of luck. There wasn't really a way to get it. So I just remember being, like 18 and being at a garage sale. And I don't remember what the book was, but I was like, holy shit, this is the one I couldn't find. And like being so excited, not only that I spent like 50 cents to buy a book that I've been wanting to read for a few years, but the fact that I actually captured something. So I think for a lot of your fans, this is going to be that moment where they're like, you know what, I didn't get in on Goblin. I couldn't afford it at the time during limited release, whatever it is. It's going to be that opportunity for them. It's the book that got away and a chance for them to get it, which reminds me again of this experience of, you a garage sale of all places, finding that one book that had eluded me. So it's super exciting for readers. Awesome. And it's for you, like I said, I mean, I think that, and again, I'm not an artist, but I would think you want your work available to anybody who wants to have it. So there is something really cool. I remember buying a limited edition Jonathan Carroll book, again, probably 25 years ago, and enjoying it. Like, I read it in such a way that I never opened the book all the way. You know what I mean? Like, I'd only crack it open at like 45 degrees. Yeah. So, but at some point, and I don't know if that book ever made it into wide distribution, but there's somebody, it was limited to like 100 copies or something. I paid a ridiculous amount of money. It was like $50 for like a 70-page book or whatever it was. But, there's that Jonathan Carroll fan that never got to read that. So if and when that does become available, that makes it so much cooler.
Yep. Man, I feel like, I'm like surrounded by the kind of thing you're talking about right now in this office, I'm like looking up, not limited edition necessarily, but just to jump on one thing you said, garage sale, like, do you find yourselves like you almost don't want to buy something on eBay because like you just want that fucking moment of seeing it live? Like I'm just looking around at any of them, where it's like to find even like The Believers. I'm just looking at the actually The Believers was a book first. The Believers, that became the movie The Believers, right? To just find The Believers, in like any used bookstore in the world would be like, oh wow, The Believers, this is that Martin Sheen movie, blah blah blah, rather than like on eBay like searching rare horror, which I do all the time, rare horror paperback, and it's like, no, stop it, just go find it in the wild, man. One time I was telling Allison, like, she wanted to travel on like just road trip travel, and I was like, oh god, that sounds like crazy to me right now, but if you presented it to me in a way of, hey Josh, do you want to go to like a bunch of used bookstores all over the country? I'd be like, yeah, let's do it.
Dude, so one of the things that I started doing like 5 or 6 months ago was I have a mission to have a physical copy of every book that we've reviewed on the podcast. And that's like we're close to 300 books now that we've talked about. And
that's an awesome idea.
And thank you. And at the time, I probably had like 120, 130 of them. And so that's what I did. I just started hitting up used bookstores specifically just to see like what I could discover. And it was a nice experience because it got me out. It got me into bookstores looking at, all the different titles that were out there. But when I did come across one of the ones that I needed that wasn't on my list, man, that was like the best, like the most rewarding experience. So it's way better that way than just going on to Amazon or Books or something like that and clicking around.
And eBay's a little cooler, right? Because then I'd say Amazon or whatever. But I mean, whatever. I'm not.
It's closer to gambling on eBay.
But there's nothing like it, man. There's nothing like I found a first edition mint The Cipher at a used bookstore. In one right around here, Kathy Koja's. I just walked in and I was like, it was like $4.50. I'm like, this book is. But there is that moment where I don't know how you guys handle this, but that moment where you got a serious fucking find and you're like, do I tell them that this is fine? Or do I just say $4.50? Yes, thank you. But I did. I walked up and I'm like, this book sells for like $150 at least online. He's like, oh no, that's what it was. It was $4.50. I'm like, great.
That's good.
I have a very weird, somewhat related story. So probably about 20 years ago, I was in a thrift store, and my girlfriend wanted to look at some stuff, and I was bored out of my mind. But they had a section that was like a weird, like antique-y section. Like it was a whole separate room that had someone that like worked a different register. So I'm just wandering around there looking at like kind of cool old lamps and stuff, and I find a box. And so there's nothing on the box that says what it is. So I open the lid, and it is a legitimate gas mask. Wow. So I go, well, this is kind of interesting, but they're handwritten text on it. So I don't exactly know if this says it's like $38 on it. So I go, I don't know if I want to pay $38 for this gas mask, but I'm thinking I'm just going to leave it on the coffee table in the living room just to fuck with people that come over. So I walk up to the lady, and I have the box open, and I go, can you tell me how much this is? And she looks at the box. She goes, what the hell is that? And I said, it's a gas mask. And she goes, and she looks at the tag and she goes, $8. So I repeat it back to her. I go, $8. And she's like, all right, how about $6? And I was like, yeah, like, because I would have paid you like double that, but I was like debating, like, is $38 like the price I want to pay? So she's like $6. So yeah, you find it's yours to take, I think. But Rob will have to edit this out if I'm wrong. Do you not own one of those weird old-fashioned paperback spinner racks, like the really shitty ones from like the 70s that you'd find in like a pharmacy for like paperback books?
I sure do, and it's new to me. The guitar player of the High Strung, Stephen Palmer, his wife Ellen, called me somewhat recently, and she was like, "Hey, I'm at this place and they got those racks for like paperbacks." I'm like, "Yeah, I want it." She's like, "There's two of them. There's the tall. I want the tall one." Okay, all right. And she drove it over right after, and right now I'm looking at it right now. It has, first of all, it has Rage, the
I'm aware
paperback. It has The Kill Riff, Who Fears the Devil, The Crone, Blood Farm, which is maybe the greatest like font and cover of all time, Isabel, Claws. I mean, I could stand up and move, but I'm not going to. That's everything I can see from here. From Below, Nightscape, The Amulet, the Frightmare. No, I don't know what that one's called. Oh, Ghost Story, like a cool old, yeah. Oh, wait, what is that one? I can't read it. Again, I could just get up, but it's kind of fun.
No, yeah. Of all the cool things I see people post, because most of my social media is just writers anyway, right? I just remember seeing that and thinking like that might be like the coolest homage, especially to like classic horror books. And I'm saying classic, I'm talking like 70s, 80s, not necessarily, Bram Stoker or whatever. But I just remember seeing that and I was like, see, this is a book lover. This is someone that can appreciate that shitty spinning rack that, like I said, anybody my age grew up. That's what you did. You went into a place and you spun that rack looking for something to read. So I thought that was so cool.
I mean, for better or worse, I think my office smells like 1986.
I'd say for better.
That might be worse. I might have to chime in on an opinion on that.
I think 86 probably smelled better at the time.
That's funny. I'm assuming Rage was one of those like bookstore finds where you found it for $3.
Yep. No, it was super expensive. But here's the thing: I almost feel like it was like a mistake because I don't know what you call this, where it's almost like the cover's like laminated. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like, like, you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like wrapped in not tape, but I can send you a photo up close of it. It's one of those though where I'm like, wait, what the fuck? What is this? And it was like, was it 200? It was something like, it was a lot, man. It was a lot. And but Rage is online for like 800-900. I mean, it's crazy. But so then I was like, so okay, this is a lot of money, and it's kind of a weird, fucked up version. It's the real deal, but there's something like maybe it's a library book. It's something, I don't even know. I don't know, but I bought it. So sometimes I worry that Rage, like I still have my eye on like a better one. And then I know a guy who bought like an entire like estate recently or a few years ago, but the person had like a warehouse of all this is gonna drive you guys crazy, of all horror novels, sci-fi, fantasy magazines, all that, but all untouched and in like plastic, right?
Wow.
Like he collected, right? And he had 9 copies of Rage.
All right, I'm not gonna beat that, but I have a good one. I have an uncle who lives in just outside Washington, D.C., and what he does as a hobby is he'll go to thrift stores, garage sales, sometimes used bookstores, but usually he goes to he'll do estate sales, libraries will do sales, things like that, and he just knows like about rare books. And so that's his whole outside of work life is just digging for gold. And one of the things that stood out to me when he was showing me like his extensive just piles of books everywhere in his little library, and one of the things that stood out to me was he's like, "Oh, you're never going to believe this," and he pulls out, he's got 2 copies of Rage.
Wow.
That are like, I didn't look at the condition up close because I was just like, it's just good enough to know that he has them, but of all of his collection, and I've seen he has a lot of really interesting stuff, that was the one that stood out as far as like the cool factor goes.
Man, right now there's there's a copy of the UK first edition of Rage, Roadwork, Running Man, and The Long Walk, and all 4 of them are like, holy shit, mint. Like, I don't usually care about that kind of thing so much, but these are like astonishingly good condition. If you go on Pinterest, if you just look up like The Long Walk first edition, it'll probably like pop up. But here's the thing, all 4 together, $18.50, and I'm like, oh dude, no, my God, what? So I'm like, again, that, I don't know, if you can do it, I guess, right? But it's like, well, how would it feel to find these though?
Yeah.
But those are UK paperback. I mean, I don't know. That's going to be like, that would be an unfathomable find, and especially to get them all together.
It occurred to me that there might be people who are listening who don't know what that is. So that was the first book I believe that Stephen King wrote under the Richard Bachman name, and I think it didn't do very well. Right? The craze came after people figured out that it was Stephen King.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, well, I don't know the exact story, but yeah, I'm sure. I read something where he wrote something about that, right? On Being Richard Bachman or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something where I don't know, but those 4, like, I mean, Rage is kind of like the holy grail of, like a mint copy of Rage would be like the holy grail of horror paperbacks, right? I think they go for like $900 online and shit, and seems like that's only going up. So yeah. I have this weird wonky laminated one, but I love it.
Yeah, it's better than not having the weird wonky laminated one.
Yeah, I love it. I haven't read it though, because like, I don't know, I don't want to read about a school shooting. You know what I mean? I'm like, nah, I don't like that.
Well, and the magic might be gone after you read it. That might be one of those things that like, sort of the myth of it is better than the actual content.
This might be one of those. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure one of your listeners right now is like, no, like,
you idiot.
But maybe one day I'll read it. But I don't know. I'm just like, definitely not right now. And right now, fantasy's been working out for me. By the way, like Terry Brooks. He's on Del Rey, and I met him when we were in Chicago.
Oh, nice.
And the coolest freaking guy, man. Him and his wife are amazing. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to read those sort of Shannara books. And I started reading them. And then this virus thing is going on. And I got to tell you guys that fantasy is an excellent, like, sort of balm right now. And I saw, I think it was Nathan Ballingren, like, I think he wrote that he's reading The Hobbit right now, and that he feels like fantasy is a good, like, balm right now. Also, it's like, I don't know, it's like the imagination, just as wild as horror, but without quite with chances are no brutality, and you know what I mean, a little less at least. And then this sort of Shannara, these Shannara books are like, I don't know, it's like they're just fun. And I kind of like need that right now because of all this stuff going on, And Carpenter's Farm is like a head trip. So it's kind of nice to be working on that and then go to a book that's just like flat out fun.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I could see why that would be just like, even just like an escape from reality. So one of the books that we recently reviewed was Providence by Max Berry, which takes place in outer space and you're fighting an alien, like a very aggressive alien race. So just being removed from where we are and what's going on, I think can be very helpful for sure.
And there's something like fantasy, not all the time, but fantasy's warm, There's I don't know what it is, but it's always been warmer to me. Sci-fi has always been a little colder. Horror has definitely always been home. But fantasy is like warm, almost like, I don't want to say cheesy, but sometimes to like a real, like if you're on a strict horror diet, fantasy can sometimes feel like maybe like dessert, And like, I've been on a strict horror diet for like 20 years, man. It's been terrible for my skin.
I think the thing about horror versus those other genres is most horror is you can really put yourself in the position of the protagonist. The thing that's harder about fantasy is, for me at least, and I think maybe I speak for a lot of people, is the protagonist in that knows a lot of things that you don't. Like, they know what the orcs are, and they know about the war between, whatever fantasy races you're talking about. So I think for me, I find it easier to put myself in horror or crime or whatever, but something that's more grounded in reality, that I can put myself in that position versus being a blue-haired, long-eared elf, for example, is something I have a harder transition into a story to kind of let it surround me as a reader.
Right, but then at a moment like right now, it's almost like I would rather be hanging out with someone who knows a bunch of shit I don't. You lead the way, because I'm surviving on like this low hum of anxiety right now. So I'm just gonna like you hold my hand and take me with you for the next 2 months, man.
Well, I know that Paul Tremblay's next book, and I only know this from reading some stuff on social media because again I haven't read the synopsis, but it has something along the lines to do with some type of outbreak. So there's some authors that are positioned either really well or really poorly right now with books that kind of encompass some type of viral infection.
I think that in Paul's case, I think that like whether I know what you mean by position, good or bad, it's hard to tell at this moment in time. But I think with him and maybe with everyone, the book's going to be fine in the long run. Why? Because he's great and his body of work is great. And so I think, I don't know. It's not like I've talked to him about this. But if he or other authors are kind of like, oh shit, man, I got a fucking pandemic book, right? I like my distant word of advice or something would be like, don't worry about it. Like, the book's gonna eventually have its own like space when this moment in time is behind us. What I really feel bad about, or just worried for or something, is maybe the person who was like literally had a release day of like March 1st or something, Yeah. Like, right at the head before we really knew what was going on. So for you to have a book coming out as we don't like we all go from what's that going on to oh shit, and you have a book and you're trying to talk about it and a tour canceled, that's the stuff where I'm like, oh boy. But the same thing I would say to them in a more optimistic way is like you wrote like El Makatsu's The Deep is great, right?
Oh yeah.
And hers came out kind of in a weird spot right here. Well, guess what? The book's freaking awesome. It's going to have a life of its own, probably be made into a movie one day, all these exciting things. You will get through this moment, but yes, this is a weird moment in time for not just pandemic authors, but like anyone releasing a fucking book right now.
Well, let me tell you that we are absolutely capitalizing on that because like in a situation where you can't leave your house, we are very much a nice port in that storm. So we're doing our best to just like, reach out and talk to like way more authors than we usually do. And it's working. Like we're connecting with people that maybe we wouldn't think to usually, like, or just like wouldn't put the energy into it. But since like me and Livius are both, well, Livius is still doing his normal job, but I'm working from home and it's easier to like manage time. Like we've ramped up a lot of what we're doing because suddenly we have maybe access we didn't before. So it's something.
Yeah, but that's a good thing. That's like that. Like people need you guys right now.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. Yeah. More of you guys right now.
Oh, seriously. So we talked about like all the books that are coming up. That Del Rey, we talked about the 4 books, and then also obviously you have Carpenter's Farm going on, but is there anything else that should be on people's radar? I know that's plenty, but I don't know if there's anything else you got in the works.
No, that's it. The boys and I are working on a new album called Southfield, and we're getting to the point where we're starting to get a little impatient, and where I may sing like a song on my machine here, and then like send the email of the vocal track to the bass player Chad, who would then mix it into the song. So like we are working on an album. We have like the basic tracks or so to like 20 of them, 20 songs down. We haven't sang everything. We were supposed to really, it was supposed to be happening right now, just like everyone else is put on hold. But that's the gist of it, man. Carpenter's Farm in Southfield is what I'm working on now. And Allison is doing like an ungodly amount of like home improvements while I'm doing this. Allison's repainted the entire house, and it almost looks like when I leave the office, it's like we live somewhere else every time. And then, and that's where we're at. I don't know. I just want people to know, like, with the Carpenter's Farm, it's like, man, I just, if you're all freaked out, man, so are we. So, all 3 of us are freaked out. So literally everyone's freaked out. So I'm hoping whatever that this connects with at least one person, and like you said, maybe even inspires someone to write a book. But even beyond books and whatever, I would say that I'm camped out on optimistic side of the line right now and through this experience, but I am also waking up certain mornings with an arm or a leg on that line, and I'm like, like sheer dread. And then like by, an hour later, I'm like, okay, we can fucking do this. Whatever. I just want to tell everyone, like, I relate. We all relate. And let's get through this fucking thing together, man.
Hey, I have a question, although that was like the perfect ending point. So, because we don't talk a lot about your music, because Rob and I are not people, who know a lot about music, I guess. How weird is that? So I'm going to assume that with the High Strung, that most of the stuff, your previous material, was recorded like in a studio, right? Like sitting across from one another. It has to be a vastly different, I would think it's a vastly different world to like be in your home collaborating with something for music, more so than it would be for like what we're doing right now, or your collaboration for Carpenter's.
Well, you know what? I wonder though. I'm like, maybe there's something to this. Like, I haven't done it yet this way, but what if I feel a little looser just being like on my own in this office singing this song? Like, maybe I might try something a little weirder. You know how like Tom Petty has that song that he kind of sings like in an Italian accent or something. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but like maybe I'll do maybe I'll like go for it a little bit more, or try more of like a different, I don't know, style, because there's literally no friend or bandmate like watching me do this. I'm just saying maybe this could work out. I'm going to do it. We're trying to do it where Mark writes the words to this one, then I sing them, then I send that to Chad, and he mixes it in the song so that we're all like involved in it, And we'll see. It sounds like cold to be removed from each other, but like, I don't know, maybe artistically maybe this could be good. Let's find out.
I've always leaned toward what I like about what you just said is like, the attitude is very much like, I'm not going to let obstacles get in the way of doing the thing. And I've always kind of tried to be that way as much as possible, which explains why me and Livia started a podcast when I was living in Vermont and he was in Illinois. We're not going to let 900 miles get in the way of us talking about books. So I definitely like the optimism and the positive approach you got going on.
All right, great. Good. Well, let's talk to each other in June and see where I'm at. No, I by then I'm like, I'm writing a book a day, guys. It's unbelievable.
Oh no, you're becoming the book.
Well, hopefully we can have you back on after we've read Mallory. That's something we'd like to do, and to do this again, because this is a great time. I just want to thank you for Carpenter's Farm. I guess there's nothing else I really want to say. Like, we've talked about it a lot. I just want to say thank you, because it's a nice welcome distraction for me. It fits in perfectly in between having to read a book a week for the podcast, that I can just pick up a couple chapters here and there as they come out. So I guess thanks for what you're doing.
All right. Well, right on. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Awesome. I'm glad. Thanks for saying that. I just turned red on air.
You made him blush, Livius. Josh, thanks so much for taking the time to the extended amount of time. Good Lord, we're almost at 2 hours now to talk to us. I think that for me, it's refreshing to have these types of conversations where it's very free form and we're just talking about what's going on, but also to pick your brain at the same time. So thank you so much for the conversation. We always love having you on.
Yeah, I loved it too. Thank you guys, and I love what you guys are doing, and I'm excited to hear your 2 Max episodes coming up soon.
What a great conversation that was. A great guest, someone that's been too long, and we clearly discussed after we stopped recording with Josh that it's we're not going to let yours go by again. So he'll definitely be back for Mallory, and who knows what else.
Yeah. So if you didn't get from this conversation that we just had that like Josh is someone that you should be reading his stuff and checking out what he's doing. I'm going to tell you right now, you should definitely check out Carpenter's Farm. And he's got all of these previous books available. And you can just tell, like, he's got an enthusiasm for books and storytelling and stuff that makes me want to push a little harder than usual to get people to support him, because the man is just doing amazing stuff all the time.
Yeah, he's and I'm not saying this because we just talked to him. He is genuinely probably the most passionate person I know when it comes to horror. So I think there's a value in knowing that someone loves the entire genre so much. By the way, I don't think we ever mentioned it's joshmalerman.com is where you can find Carpenter's Farm. 9 chapters up currently. I believe Monday, chapter 10 will go up.
Yep. So speaking of, we have more content coming just in the next upcoming days. We will be posting our review of Grady Hendrix' book, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, is our next review, which is coming up in just a couple of days. And we should be having an interview with Grady Hendrix as well. So tons of content coming at you. So join us soon for more of that.
All right. That wraps it up for this kind of bonus impromptu weird episode of Booked. Until next time, I'm Olivia Snedden.
And I'm Rob Olson. Keep reading.